Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. I'm San Francisco Mayor London Breed, and I'm really excited to be here today, joined by Supervisors Ahsha, Safaí, as well as Vallie Brown. This, as you all know, is a representation of a lot of the work that we have been doing in San Francisco to come up with creative solutions to address homelessness. What we all have to understand is that sometimes it's not a one-size-fits-all. And trying to understand exactly the challenges that people who are homeless are dealing with and meeting them with where they are and getting them the help and the support they need to transition into a more permanent, stable housing situation is something that we care about. This is why we have been fighting so hard to build more shelter beds, to look at places that are underutilized space, to identify ways in which we can have temporary or permanent space to allow for shelter, to allow for a situation like this where we are taking a parking lot slated for 100% affordable housing in the near future and using it during a time where it's not being used for a place for people to safely park, get supportive services and resources, and make sure that we are able to help people transition into a permanent situation. And I will say that I'm really proud to work with two individuals who have been the leaders in this effort, starting with the Board of Supervisors and understanding that there are so many people, even before the homeless count was released, that showed that we have had a significant increase in the number of people living in their vehicles. These two supervisors have led the efforts around solutions around safe parking for those who unfortunately are sleeping in their vehicles as a way to provide a safe place like where we're standing here today. In October of 2019, the city counted over 700 occupied vehicles in San Francisco, both passenger cars and RVs. So we know that this is something that we need to provide a solution for. And I want to be clear, because the first thing you hear from folks, well, it's not enough, it's not enough. Well, it's better than what it was. There was nothing in the past, and now this is an example. This does not, from my understanding, what we're trying to propose here today is not something that we are familiar with any place in the United States where this is happening and actually has a track record of proven to be successful. So we are, really stepping out and being really the first to try something different that we are hoping could work to support people that we need support. So I really want to thank not just the supervisors, but I really want to thank Urban Alchemy, because they are going to be the ones, and you'll be hearing from Lena Miller in just a minute. This program has been absolutely incredible in the Civic Center area and other places throughout San Francisco, working with so many of our vulnerable population of San Francisco, helping to keep our neighborhoods, our communities, and Civic Center and downtown area safe and clean and accessible, and doing it by treating people with respect and dignity. And I really appreciate the work that they are doing. I also want to appreciate the Lakeview OMI community. Mr. and Mrs. Harris are here, as well as Steve and others. This is not something that is always popular to do. And not only did Supervisor Safaí lead in this effort to work with the community and have a number of community meetings to talk about this location being used for this purpose, he really took a lot of hits from the community, and fortunately, so many community members were open and willing to allow this use to take place, and we truly appreciate this neighborhood for allowing us to do this on a temporary basis. This Vehicle Triage Center is something I think that can be potentially duplicated throughout San Francisco. But ultimately, the goal is to get people into safe, affordable housing. That is really the goal of this. But this is a way to bring people inside, to provide showers, to provide restroom facilities, to make sure that we're doing it in a way that meets people where they are and treats them with respect and dignity. And so I am grateful to be here today to kick this off. But I do want to say that a lot of work through Jeff Kosinski's office, the mayor's office on homelessness, has gone into identifying all over San Francisco people who are living in their vehicles and trying to create a way so that we can know what already exists. So I want to make it clear that this is not an open invitation to people in other counties to come to San Francisco. Because the fact is, we have a long waiting list of people who we have identified, and they will be our priority, along with other unhoused individuals who sadly are sleeping on the streets. We, of course, invite other counties to look at this as an example and to do their part in helping to address this issue, because this is not just an issue unique to San Francisco. This is an issue that impacts the entire state of California. So we are hopeful that we will be partnering in the near future to talk about ways in which we can move forward with solutions like this and others to make sure that San Francisco is not the only city and county bearing the burden of the expense of doing unique things like what we're doing today. And so with that, since the rain is starting to come down, and you guys know I don't like to get my hair wet, so we are really on dangerous territory here. But I'd like to introduce the supervisor of this community, Supervisor Ahsha Safaí.
We'll pause for a minute for Mayor Breed to have an umbrella. You know, I want to say first and foremost, I think that this is a historic day in San Francisco. I know that people have been talking about doing safe parking in one form or another for over a decade, but truly we're standing here today because of the individuals that stand behind me. We had a situation where I went out, and I've told this story a few times. I went out on Christmas Day with my daughter. Santa had gotten her a bike, and we went down to the playground there in Cayuga on Alamany, and the street was just lined with people living in RVs. And I just thought to myself, what's happening? So I called SFMTA. I started getting calls from neighbors, and they were saying that they wanted these cars removed. And I think that the knee-jerk reaction often in these situations is to just think about the vehicles, but not think about the individuals that are occupying these vehicles. And these are folks that are human beings just like you and me. They're working. Oftentimes they're students. Oftentimes they're veterans. And in most situations, they're people that are productive members of society and want to be respected just like you and me. And so, but I will tell you, my knee-jerk reaction was to call the SFMTA and say, where are those signs? We need to get the no overnight parking signs up. And SFMTA said, we're going to pause on that. We're not going to keep doing this. All it does is push people from one block to another. And then I got back to my office, and there was a photograph of a young woman living in an RV. And it was a note, handwritten note, and it was from my colleague, Supervisor Brown, and said, let's work on this together. We have to do this in a humane way. And so that really caused me to pause. And I walked into her office, and I said, don't ever blindside me like that again. And we kind of had a laugh. But the truth was, I said, you know what, you're right. We have to do this the right way. So we buckled down, our staffs buckled down. We wrote a piece of legislation. We went around the Bay Area, and we looked at best practices. And we then crafted a piece of legislation. And the reason that this is able to happen is because of that piece of legislation. We also marched into Mayor Breed's office. I said, we need to come talk to you.
You walked into
We marched. There was two of us, so we marched. And the mayor, we had a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, but by the end, the mayor committed money, and she challenged me first and foremost. She said, are you going to put one of these in your district? And I said, I absolutely am, and I know exactly where we can go. I called Mission Housing Development Corporation. They had just gotten control of this site. I called Jeff Kosinski and the head of the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, and we had a conversation to say, can we do this? Can this be the first place in the city where we do safe parking? Fast forward, it looked like once the census came in, that there really was a justification for doing this. We had, out of the increase in homelessness, 70% of that increase over the last few years, and I think it was around 13% increase in homelessness, 70% are those living in their vehicles. So if now was not the time, then it never was going to be the time. So we did that. The mayor allocated over $1 million for this effort, and then we engaged the community. As the mayor mentioned, Marion Al Harris, Dory Kamong, Steve Courier, Reverend Glenda Hope, she's not here, the New Mission Terrace Improvement Association, the Cayuga Improvement Association. We had 45 individuals in the room, and we took a vote. And after that vote, it was a unanimous vote that we would proceed with this. We had a community meeting at Balboa High School. 600 people showed up. And by the end, and I'll tell you, Mary and Al will tell you, we never have 600 people show up for a meeting. But overwhelmingly, it leaned towards support of this. So we wanted to be the first in the city. We wanted to share in the responsibility of dealing with our homeless crisis. So I just want to thank the mayor for supporting our effort. I also want to give a special thanks to Mohammed Nuru and the Department of Public Works. We would never have been able to move as fast as we could if the Department of Public Works hadn't been able to mobilize and move this in such a way that we could get this ready. You see the solar paneling, you see the security cameras, you see the lighting, you see the privacy fencing, the restriping, the bathrooms, the office space. And Urban Alchemy will be here on site 24 hours a day, at least 2 individuals. We have our captain, Captain Woon. We have a liaison with the BART police. We're working with the SFMTA. And yes, there will be a little bit of tough love involved in this too, because when we do go out and proactively move people out of the streets where they're living in their vehicles, we're not going to invite more individuals to occupy those spaces. And the SFMTA has now committed to work with us to put up those signs so that we can encourage people to utilize spaces like this. Myself and Vallie Brown, Supervisor Brown, called for a hearing. We're going to look at other spaces throughout the city. I know the mayor supports that. President Yee has already stepped up and said he's looking for a location in his district. Supervisor Shaman Walton is looking for space in his district. And we're going to do this in a humane and a collaborative way. So I just want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank all the individuals that have made this possible. And we're going to continue to look to expand this and make this model a successful model. And as the mayor said, in 1 year, we're going to break ground on 100% affordable housing on this site. So we're going to use this time to see what works, what improvements can be made, and how we can do it better, and how San Francisco can continue to lead throughout the Bay Area. So I'm going to now introduce Supervisor, oh no, wait.
You introduced Brown.
Okay, Supervisor Vallie Brown, my co-sponsor in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Safaí, and thank you, Mayor Breed. It was over a year ago that I actually did send a photo to his office of me living in a van, actually, when I was 13. As some of you know, my mom had odd jobs, and she was always struggling to really make ends meet. And there were times that she didn't have enough money for the next apartment. And so she would borrow a van from a friend, and we would live in a van for a few months until she was able to get money together for the next apartment. And, you know, as a child of 12 or 13 living in a van, there's a lot of struggles. There's things like you have to wear a bathing suit all the time. People ask, why do you wear a bathing suit all the time? Because you went to rest stops and gas stations to wash up, and you couldn't be naked. You had to have a bathing suit. You had to do your homework before sundown because there was no light, and maybe a flashlight. You had to think about where you were going to eat because you had nowhere to cook meals. And so these things that are just every day that we don't think about are things that you think about when you live in a vehicle. You have to plan your life so carefully when you live in a vehicle. So and I have to say, the things sometimes are meant to be, because as a child, I really don't have many photographs of myself because we move so much and you lose things. But I found this photo of me living in a van at 13. And so I felt like it was meant to be, of me moving forward and really saying, why aren't we thinking differently about housing people, about helping people that are struggling? It's really a thin veil from being homeless on the street is when you live in a vehicle. So I want to thank Supervisor Safaí. I never tried to do a gotcha with you. I just wanted to say, you never know who lives in these vehicles. And so thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Breed, for for putting the money forward, because it was $1 million, to say, let's try this out. And thank you to this community for stepping up and saying, let us be the first. I absolutely feel we're going to need more of them throughout the city, just like we need navigation centers, homeless shelters. We need more. And this is a beginning. So thank you, everyone, for coming and for sharing and supporting, and let's move forward. Thank you.
And so the folks who are going to help manage this safe parking site is Urban Alchemy. As I said, they're the ones who have been doing an incredible job at Civic Center, basically the ambassadors of the community, whether it's managing the public toilets or overseeing public spaces in other areas and trying to get people help and support, and in some cases connected to our HOT team, the homeless outreach team. They've been absolutely incredible and an invaluable resource in San Francisco. And the person who is in charge of that effort is Lena Miller.
Thank you, Mayor Breed. Thank you, Jeff Kosinski. Thank you, Mohammed. I want to thank everybody who allowed us to be a part of this effort. I think it's very, very important. As we see that homelessness continues to increase all the time. And we are tasked with continuing to find ways to deal with it. A lot of people, sometimes people get frustrated in the city, and there's a lot of NIMBYism. What I see from my perspective, because as Mayor Breed said, we're all around the city, and in every intersection where you see there's a mix of homelessness and mental illness and addiction, there we are. And from what I've seen from that perspective and talking with people from all over the country, is this situation is only getting worse. We are not in a position where we can say we don't want to deal with it. We can't deal with it. We must deal with it, and we must continue to find creative ways to address people with love, with respect, with dignity. As Supervisor Brown said, that used to be her. It used to be and is a lot of our family members, and it's not going anywhere. So it's up to us as human beings to find ways to deal with this that really respects folks and that we can scale up. What we saw with the fires recently is that a lot of people are now living in their vehicles. And I think when we see more and more people being displaced through climate change, what we're going to see is more and more people who are living in the streets. And so now we have to get in front of this. And I'm really, really honored to be a part of thought leaders and thought partners who aren't saying it's somebody else's problem. We need to find a way to get people out of here so other people feel comfortable, but people who are putting their heads together and doing the hard work to find creative ways to be able to address this issue, like I said, with love and dignity, and eventually we're all going to have to scale. So thank you very much, and we are really grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this.
Thank you, Lena. And our last speaker today is a person who grew up in San Francisco in the Bayview Hunters Point community, born and raised, and one of the first clients that we'll be working with here, Sandra Hughes.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sandra Hughes, and I was born and raised in the Bayview in San Francisco. As a child, I experienced a lot of trauma. As a result, I have struggled most of my life with trusting anyone, even those who might want to help me. I am currently homeless and I live in my RV, and the neighborhood around me has changed. Where I used to ride my bike as a child, there are businesses, and the community members yell at me, not to park there, to move away. They treat me as if I'm less than human. I wish they could understand that I don't want to live in my RV or have to park there either. I want what everyone else wants: safety, dignity, and a community. I don't feel safe living in my RV. It's been broken into over 5 times, and I'm scared every night when I try to sleep. I don't feel safe around people, so shelters are not an option for me. When the HOT team told me about the VTC opening up and reached out and gave me information, I thought the opportunity to move into the Vehicle Triage Center with my RV would offer me safety and security, and maybe I could learn to build trust with people until I can find stable housing. I want a key for my own apartment. I want to reconnect with my family. I want safety. Moving into the VTC would be a first step, and the feeling of safety might allow me the chance to start to heal and rebuild my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, again for sharing your story. And as you can see, we got a lot of work to do in the city. And part of it is the opening of this parking lot as a safe place for people to park. But ultimately, it all goes back to housing. And I know you feel like I repeat this over and over again. It's not just about the money necessary to build housing, although we all know that San Francisco is one of the most expensive places to build housing in the first place. It's also about having the courage to cut back on the bureaucratic red tape so we don't have to wait years to build housing, so that people like Sandra and so many others who are sleeping on our streets have a place to call home. This is what we will continue to work on. Yes, we celebrate a milestone in that we have this parking lot for people to park safely, but ultimately they need housing, and we have to do a better job as a city to build it. Thank you all so much for being here. Again, thank you to Department of Public Works and Mohammed Nuru. Thank you to the HOT team and the work that you do every single day out on the street. Thank you to the San Francisco Police Department and the folks who work with us. And, oh, okay, wrap it up. It's time to go. Thank you.
Hey.